Welcome to Divine Decode, where we explore the sacred intelligence woven into the human experience. I'm your host, Pragya, and today we are decoding something truly transformative: the way we see learning, difference, and human potential. Our guest, Russell Van Brocklen, is an innovator in dyslexia education whose approach turns conventional teaching on its head. He does not see dyslexic students as struggling. He sees them as wired for brilliance, with minds that perceive the world in beautifully unconventional ways. In a society obsessed with standardization, Russell's work is a reminder that difference is not something to fix, it's something to understand, honor, and build from. First of all, thank you, Russell. Thank you for being on our show. It's an honor to host you today.
Thanks for having me.
Russell, let's start with this. But the, most people they encounter dyslexia through labels, like difficulty, disorder, or delay sometimes. But your approach, it begins with strengths. It begins with empowering. So, what was the moment, perhaps personal or professional, that made you realize that dyslexia it wasn't a deficit but a different kind of intelligence all in over?
Well, for me, this was the last thing I was supposed to be doing with my life. I was supposed to be a bureaucrat for the New York State government. This all started for me when I applied for the New York State Assembly internship in the late 90s when I was finishing up college. I wanted to know how laws were created. I didn't want some idea, I wanted to know. So I went there and I said, well, I gave them my neuropsychological evaluation. I said, I have a first grade reading and writing level. And they said, this is not going to work here. So it was kind of an emergency. They went up to the speaker's office and they had a committee formed and they came back and says, we're pulling you from the program. We're putting you in the majority leaders program at counsel's office because there's 3 administrative assistants who could help me with my horrendous writing, which was great for me because they dealt with graduate students and I was signed up for an undergrad internship. So it was a great experience for me. For the academic portion, I gave a very long presentation, a question and answer session in lieu of a 30-page research paper. Very standard accommodation for me. At the end, they recommended 15 credits of A minus. And I go back to the State University of New York Center at Buffalo's political science department. They look at this and say, we don't like these accommodations, even though they were made by the New York State Assembly. So here's your 15 credits of F. And that was it for me. I was done with the discrimination. And I asked my other professors, where can I go to force myself to learn to read and write in law, in grad school? And they said, well, there's only really one place, law school. So where I really learned that this was a superpower is I walk into law school. It's the second day. They use a method called the Socratic method. If you want to know more about it, it's in a famous movie from the 1970s called The Paper Chase. So the professor's calling on students and he's just slamming them. They don't know the answer. He asks a few more questions. He embarrasses them and he moves on to the next victim. They do this to get you to acclimate as quickly as possible to law school and actually be able to answer the questions. Well, that didn't happen to me. Uh, what happened is for the first time in my life, everything organized. I could see everything clearly. And what I eventually found out a few years later in a book called Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz, in the second edition, page 78, figure 23, is you see the back part of the dyslexic brain has like almost nothing going on. The general education students are going crazy. But the front part of the dyslexic brain's about 2.5 times overactive, deals with word analysis followed by articulation. And that's what clicked into me when Professor Warner, called on me. Everything just slowed down and organized. I could just see where things were going for the first time in my life. He asked me a question, I answered. He asked me a couple more questions, I answered. He's like, "This isn't working. I'm supposed to slam this kid and move on." So then he starts really asking me really tough questions, and I keep answering. Before you know it, a couple minutes later, I'm leaning forward shouting at him. He's leaning forward shouting at me. And this is going on for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Then he raised his hands and he said, "Russell, in the interest of time, we have to move on. You couldn't be any more correct." I learned to read within a month in law school, write within a couple of years. Then I got funded by the New York State Senate and in one class period a day for the school year. Mind you, we were going after the ideal students, highly motivated, highly intelligent, college bound, excellent family support. We had their best special ed teacher. It was Susan Ford at the April Park Central School District. So why did I do that? I wanted to see what I could do with students like me. I wanted to see if I could just solve this. So in one class period a day for the school year, we took the students from middle school writing skills, think 16 to 18-year-old students writing like they were 12 or 13. And at the end, they were writing as of entering graduate students. Think about 22. And that cost New York State taxpayers less than $700 a year. And that's where I got started.
That's actually very inspiring and very profound. Thank you for sharing that with us, Russell. And it's just these efforts that help you, make big changes in the world. And big as in it should not always be the quantity or the um the most profound change, but starting small and working for something which you faced and which you thought would actually be something that a lot of people need, and changing that perception and rewiring how we define intelligence altogether is it's genuinely inspiring. And I'm so glad that I get to know about your journey. um our world, it still treats difference with suspicion. Okay, so in classrooms or in students who don't fit the system, they're often made to feel like errors in the design, right? They're literally bullied, or they're made to realize that, oh, you're less than everybody else, you're not enough. So how do you begin to rewrite that story to show teachers, to show parents, or even policymakers that difference, it is not dysfunction, but it is a design, and that there is a whole different way differences should be approached and should be viewed in society. So, what is your take on that?
Well, first of all, they're not doing this on purpose. The reason why schools teach what they teach is because for 80+% of the population are not neurodiverse, of which dyslexia is just the one with the most severe reading and writing concerns. So schools operate the way they operate because let's take a typical smart kid. I'm going to call him John. John has 125 IQ, which is well above average, just short of Mensa. He works very hard. He plans properly. And then when he does that, not for every subject equally, but in general, he does very well. Okay. But for a dyslexic, they could work 2 or 3 times as hard as John and nothing gets done. They're doing horrible because our kindergarten through college system focuses primarily on the back part of the brain where we got next to nothing going on. Dyslexics focus on the front part of the brain, which is what happens in grad school, where we have a huge advantage. We're top of our class day one or soon thereafter. This is that's what happened to me in law school. I just adapted like a fish to water. And the other part of it is when I had to come up with my idea and get it approved by a senior professor, that was supposed to take years. I did in less than 2 weeks. It's a huge advantage for being dyslexic in grad school. But what do we do for normal kids during the school year? Well, let's first of all look at what the problem is. Number one, these kids are academic specialists, not generalists. We like focusing on a very narrow area. So let me give you an example of that. One of my students, her name is Casey. Just so everybody knows, I never saw this before. I will never see this again. This is a one-off exceptional kid. She was in 5th grade, 10 years old, turned 11 over the summer. She was reading at 2nd grader like a 7-year-old. So Casey was very interested in Theodore Roosevelt, so I assigned her The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt. 900 pages, 10th grade to first year college level, 16 to 18-year-old level reading material. She's reading like she's 7. In Casey, on her own, decided to work 2 to 3 hours a night, 6, 7 nights a week for 6 months. At the end of that time, she was reading at the 10th grade level, an increase of 8 years in 6 months. I worked with her for about 15 minutes a week because that's what her parents could afford at the time. All right. So now, super motivated kid. What happens when we step outside her speciality? I assigned her another book, my most popular one, Walt Disney, The Triumph of the American Imagination. Casey hated the book. I asked her mom if we could do this for a while just because I want to see what would happen when we stepped outside of her speciality. It ended up she dropped her motivation by about half. Most kids, you're down about 75, 80%. So think about that. You step out their speciality, you're down 75, 80% right at the start. And not only, and if that's not fatal enough, the schools teach in general, from the general to the specific. They might ask, what effect did Martin Luther King have? What effect did Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech have on the American Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s? Again, if we go to a typical student like John, fish to water, they know exactly what to do. For a dyslexic, it's like grabbing fog. There's literally nothing we can hold on to. All right. And they're certainly not doing the front part of the brain, according to Yale's research, is word analysis followed by articulation. So the school, the way that they teach it, fundamentally is designed to make the dyslexic student fail. How do we get around that? Is this meant to be forever? No. What we have to do is we have to take the dyslexic student and during an intervention period, bring their reading and writing to grade level or beyond. An example I like to use is Kimberly and Reed. I met Kimberly in December 27th of 2024. Reed was homeschooled. He was a year and a half behind. If Reed continued, if he was in public school, which he wasn't, for the rest of the school year, he was supposed to increase by 2, maybe 2.5 points. That didn't happen. Reed increased by 20 points. He went from percentile. Reading went from the 11th to the 65th percentile. Writing went from the 4th to the 64th percentile. All right, so what happened? Because his mom taught him 7 times faster he was expected to learn in school. Reed wanted to go to public school because his friends came and said, Reed, we want you to go to public school with us for social reasons. If this was January, he would have been held back. He would have been put in special ed. He wouldn't be with his friends, unhappy kid. Because his mom solved things the way every mom dreams, he reads in 6th grade now, doing just fine. So this is only for the intervention period. But during that intervention period, you have to follow the rules. Number one, focus on what the kid's really interested in, their speciality, their area of extreme interest and ability. For Reed, that was Wolverine from X-Men. Next, you can't teach these kids from the general to the specific during the intervention period. You have to teach them from the specific to the general. Why? If you ask a dyslexic, do you have ideas flying around your head in your speciality? Do you have ideas flying around your head at light speed, but with little to no organization? They're going to say yes. So again, do you have ideas flying around your head in your speciality at light speed, but with little to no organization? Yes. So we need to force the brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output. Okay. Again, we have to force the brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output. So we ask the question, like, what effect what personally compelled Martin Luther King to want to give his famous speech? And then we find the answer. And that answer gives us a question, which gives us another answer. And we keep going, and that forces the brain to organize itself by using writing as a measurable output. And then we teach word analysis followed by articulations. Okay, so if you put those three things together during the intervention period, like Reed, for him, it was about 6 months. And then he went to a little bit above average, and he's doing completely fine in school. So that's the key difference. You have to follow that model during the intervention period, and then the dyslexic student should be fine.
Hmm. Thank you so much for that framework, first of all. And that actually sums up the whole, the scenario and the whole expectations of the society, and what actually is the actual scenario, and who is to be blamed, and who is not to be. I totally understand the point that you've shared, and thank you for that refreshing take, because we often, play this game of blaming and rather than understanding what the actual situation is. And it actually goes both ways, right? It has to be understood, and it has also to be given back to them and to society. So that makes so much sense. We talk a lot about teaching methods, right? But we sometimes fail to talk about emotional safety and self belief. And these are the foundations of real learning. So, how do your methods they help dyslexic students? You were anyways discussing that with us, but I want to know, like, is there any anecdote that you have that how did your method it helped dyslexic students rebuild their sense of trust in themselves, and how are they now, and what are they doing in their lives, and anything that you want to share with our audience?
Well, I'll just go back to my original program. Again, these were highly motivated, highly intelligent kids who should have been fighting to be valedictorians of their class, and weren't. So I'm just going to give you an example of the ones that we followed who scored the best. Well, the first one, her name was Michaela. Uh, Michaela, she said what she practiced with us. She goes to college. The professor says, "Here's your assignment." And she said it was virtually exactly what we practiced. So she went to college with her laptop. And just so you know, Michaela's already celebrated her 20th high school reunion. So she opens up her laptop and she takes the assignment, and then just emails the professor. And she goes up and says, "Can you check your email?" She says it's done. He looked at that and said, "Listen, you can't do it that fast. There's no way." And she said, "Well, I practiced this for the last 6 months." And he looked at it and said, "A minus." And she said, "I'll just take the A minus." He's like, "How did you do this so fast?" He's like, "Oh, I've been practicing that for months." Professor's very confused. She's now a writer. Okay. We had several students who went through one. All her professors said, "You know what? You should be a PhD. You should do research." And she said, "No, I want to be in the field, in the classroom." She's a special ed teacher. Okay. So a lot of the students, they've gone on to being very, some of my kids just like working with their hands. So they're in the union making six figures. Um, and they're very happy with it. A lot of them have moved on to master's degrees. Some have gone on to doctorates. But they said this was the defining moment that allowed them to finally do things, to finally have their brain, as they said, we finally found a way to turn it on.
That's beautiful. And that's actually really, really nice. Thank you for sharing that. Because um, also we see technology, right? It's literally all pervasive. It's everywhere, and it offers endless tools for neurodiverse learners. Uh, so how do we ensure that tech it remains a bridge to understanding rather than becoming a barrier that depersonalizes learning, or hindering the opportunities. So, do you think that AI and adaptive learning tools they can replicate the intuitive empathy, or how is it the scene with AI in this aspect of society?
Well, first of all, I'm going to distinguish the level of AI. I bought when OpenAI came out with ChatGPT Pro last December. It's $200 a month. I bought it that day. So I'm going to to me, that's adult AI, the $20 a month version. Uh, to me, it's something people use to have fun with, not for serious work. So what I found is I use two systems. I use ChatGPT 5 Pro, and then when I actually have to submit things for writing, I use Apogee's Sonic 4.5 because it writes a lot better than ChatGPT does. So what I do is when we're dealing with problems, there's a book called The Craft of Research, Context Problem Solution. That's what I show students now. Like for example, when I showed Reed, he went in that 6-month period, that increase, that was context. That's what I show elementary kids. And we have to come up with a problem statement, then come up with something that's an innovative solution. When you're dealing with 5 Pro, what it allows you to do is to send off to the artificial intelligence to do the intellectual grunt work so that you're not sitting a whole week in the library looking things up. But then what you have to do is ask like 5 Pro, how would I solve this problem? And explain this to me like you're an 8th grader. Okay. Take this complicated thing and tell me how you solve this. And that is it's explaining it to you. Remember, it takes 5 to 25 minutes for it to do anything. When it's explaining it to you, the purpose of the dyslexic, and this is what we're good at because the part of our brain is 2.5 times overactive. We're seeing how it's suggesting to solve the solution. And then you have to be very good at asking questions in your speciality. Remember, work today is very specialized. If you most companies don't care if you can analyze Shakespeare. They want to know if you can help them with what they're concerned with. So ask the questions that come to you, and then what you're looking to do is you ask those questions is you're trying to find a solution, a connection that the AI missed. And that's where I doubt AI is ever going to replace humans. That instinctive insight, and dyslexics have this in spades. That's why, as I said, when I was in grad school, everything just lined up and I could answer serious questions for the first time. I used that to find a different solution. And then I asked, well, run this. How would that work out? And then I have it run different scenarios until I got it down. I got it solved. Then I take that document and I put it over to Sonic 4.5 and I say, how do I turn this into a report? I spend another $100 a month on that because I can't be sitting around just being limited to 45 prompts every 5 hours. It recommends things. I tell it, I don't like this, change that. It's like having an editor until I finally have a finished report. Now, at that point, if it's not really that important, I just send it off. If it is that important, I will send it to a human editor who is going to make some very minor changes. But I used to have to go to an editor each time I wanted to send an email. So people say, well, you're spending $300 a month. Well, I run my own business. I'm working every day of the week. So spending $10 a day for all of this, which is 5, 10x my productivity, I think it's well worth it. That's an example of how to use AI, in the real world.
Mm, That's actually um beautiful, and I love that, because tools they can actually assist, and um transformation happens this way, wherein relationships, societies, and algorithms they work hand in hand, and they are the new normal, and they become the new normal for everybody. So that's actually a very fresh take. Thank you for that. Also, do you believe that we are approaching a shift, where education will move from being information based to imagination based in a few like decades, because what I feel that there has been efforts, wherein a lot of information based techniques have been removed, and the imagination part of it have is like it's being instilled, and it's still a process. So what do you think, is this shift actually doable, and would it come in the bigger picture, or is it something else that you're expecting from the education sector?
Oh, it's far simpler than that. Everybody's talking about the majesty of AI and where the world is going, and it hasn't changed. So let me tell you what happened. When I presented in New York City at the International Dyslexia Association's New York City branch, my original program in 2006, the one funded by the New York State Senate, the professors came to me and said, some of your students scored in the 70th percentile of the 70th percentile of entering grad students. We don't care. We want the craft of research, context, problem, solution. When you write a solution, if the reader doesn't learn something substantive, rewrite the paper, because if they didn't learn anything worth reading, don't write it, which pretty much eliminates about every paper written at the undergraduate and high school level in the United States, even at the Ivy League. I just got off a podcast with a he just happens to be a dyslexic associate professor. He said the same thing. Kids should know how to do this in high school before they go to college. I also know that no New York City private school teaches at this level. So we have a huge mismatch. So what I did is I combined the craft of research with a book called Overcoming Dyslexia, and I focus on these context problem solution with word analysis, which is using universal themes and how to reason things out from those word analysis. It makes teaching the craft of research doable. I've dropped context to 9 and 10-year-olds. Okay. It's so much more evolved. When I do problem, I show students how to write body papers like they're at least 18. In actuality, people are telling me it's more like 22. I'm using 18 to be conservative so they can pass all their state exams. And then we go on to show them how to do something completely original. Why is this important? Because if you know this process, you can go and work with artificial intelligence, even if you know nothing about artificial intelligence and you don't know how to prompt to save your life. You go there and you say, okay, I have a problem. You work with the AI, you talk with the AI until you figure out until you figure out context. Then you work with it to come up with a problem statement. Then you work with it to come up with an innovative solution because you know how. I found when I integrate for each step and I focus on using a universal theme followed by good uh, reasoning, okay? Good, not word analysis followed by articulating, how to articulate those things. I'm taking this PhD book and I can show this to kids. Once they practice all the way through that, they can then apply that and learn things in college. And then when they go out to the real world, they can hit the ground running. What companies are expecting now is they're expecting these kids to become senior within 6 to 12 months. Now think about that. Before it could take, 5, 10, 15 years to become senior. Now they're expecting it so fast. How? One example I teach my kids is when they're in college, I will say, okay, you have a job to do. Go run on ChatGPT, run a deep research report on anything you have to do. If you're writing a proposal, don't just do one deep research report. I have it create about 25, 30,000 words. Run one on each section, each subsection, and then work it through with Apogee, Sonic 4.5 until you get it right. And they found that they're like, wow, I've learned so much and how to do this. And they learn how to become senior very quickly. If you can do that within 6 to 12 months, you're going to get paid a lot more than your parents have because you're going to be so economically valuable. If you can't, it's not good.
That's actually simple and less complications. They actually make it doable, and that's fascinating at the very same time. Um,
Well, you just have to understand, it's in a book called The Craft of Research. It's in our fifth or sixth iteration out there. And this is what you have to be able to apply. You have to do this like tying your shoe, unconscious competence. And it takes a long time. People look at that and say, this is too complicated. It's like, yes, it was designed for doctoral students and they're trying to make it accessible to super high school kids. I found by focusing on word analysis, using a universal theme to focus, and then to articulate from that, by applying that to those steps, I can drop context down to, 9 and 10-year-old, and they pick up on it really fast because that's the part of our brain where we have 2.5 times the neural activity. People say, "Well, you're dyslexic, you can't write." I said, "Yeah, I'm still not a great writer. I don't have to be. I have the AI doing the writing for me. Nobody cares if I wrote it or that wrote it. They just want a good quality finished written product, not the slop that most people are writing nowadays. Just think about most of the stuff generated by AI. It's slop. You follow the craft of research process, and you're going to have a really, really good report that's usable. And you hear all these people losing their jobs to AI. They're not. They're losing it to people who can use AI effectively. And again, I'm not talking about the $20 version. I'm talking about the professional AI stuff that's 100, $200 a month. You get used to that and you're going to be very valuable. People ask me, why do I use two services? I said, because OpenAI can't write a finished product. That's what Sonic 4.5 is good for. But Sonic 4.5 is kind of, it's kind of dumb. I can go to 5 Pro and I can either run a deep research report or have 5 Pro just answer a question. And the reasoning is so much better. So it's the two combined that allows me to produce really high quality work at an incredibly accelerated. I mean, what I'm doing, 10 years ago, I would have needed a team of people to do just my part of my company. And I'm doing this because I want to make sure it's coming out in my voice for critical things. But at any one time, I'm doing like 2 or 3 different projects waiting for it, every piece to do, because it takes forever to think. So that's just how valuable this process becomes, but you need to understand again, what's the craft of research? Context, problem, solution. Know how to do that well, and you will be completely fine.
That's actually very insightful, and thank you for that. Um, Thank you, Russell. Thank you for guiding us into this deeper understanding of dyslexia. And you've not, you've made us have this clear idea that it's not a limitation. It's it's this human creativity and a very brighter chance of opportunity, wherein people they have the ability to showcase themselves, and it's just the matter of opportunity and chance given to them. And to everybody listening, may we start seeing learners not by what they lack, but by what they offer. Because every difference, it holds a design, and every challenge hides a gift waiting to be decoded. This is Pragya Malvya, and you've been listening to Divine Decode, where we uncover the sacred intelligence in being human. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeing differently, and keep believing in the unseen brilliance around you. And please take up insights from Russell and his view and his perception on the whole, whole idea of dyslexia and how people see it, how society sees it, and how integrating that with AI is actually beautiful. So I'm actually hoping that you take something away from today's conversation. And thank you so much, Russell.